This is the Discover the World project, something I've been working on for the past couple years. What I've done is divided the world into about 7 to 9 different geographic/cultural areas, all based on music tonal scale. This gives me a starting point. If anyone has anything else to add, I'm all ears. Starting with Africa, I've labeled here as Zania, is the heart of cultural and expansion. What I've done is followed several cultural elements as they progress outward from Africa into the Arabic Peninsula, and then to India, and then to Eastern Asia, then the Pacific Rim, and I've also got the areas of Northern Asia, Europe, also an area of research labeled as Amarant of American descent, and I also have Islamic as an area because of its significant cultural elements. From there, I've started to collect research into each of these areas. I've isolated it down to a couple elements of culture that are common to each area. Music, of course, is a big one, but also the visual arts. There's dance, drama, literature. I've been collecting food. I just don't have anything in the database yet. But what I've done is followed the progression and started to collect information from Africa to the Arab Peninsula to India, and again through the rest of these areas. Northern Asia, Europe, just a combination of so many different things. Also the Islamic culture, which expands well beyond what I'm showing here, but in each one of them, the elements of literature, drama, how they relate not only to the culture as a whole, but also how they relate to other cultures. Here we have Amarant, which is of American descent or origin. Now initially what I had done is put all this information into a mind map, but it was so much information it kept crashing. So what I did was develop a new kind of model. This is actually done in a CAD program, but what it allows me to do is to visualize this in 3 dimensions. Let's imagine that this center, this collection point, is for anything of African culture. It can be a person, it could be an application, but what it involves is this center and radial communication out to different, here showing cultural elements, music, dance, of literature, and how communication back and forth in terms of research is all mirrored or transparent at the center. Now as we follow these colors, we'll be looking at green for research. Red represents not just written information like you would find online or in a book, but also a human representative of it. So not only do you have information, you have, in terms of looking for elements of African culture, looking in what I'll consider the neighborhood within your own local community in terms of who might be a local representative or authority on music or dance or food. And if it's food, do they deliver? And then along with the neighborhood, think about expanding one more step outward, what I call the community, which is anything beyond your local region up through the entire rest of the world. So again, here, the center being Africa. We're thinking about collecting research and information into music, the visual arts, but on a more national or international scale. Not just information, but again, people. Now the way this really shows itself is in a 3-dimensional form. Again, the green is research, red is local representatives, and blue is national and international representatives. So if we're looking into cultural elements from Africa, we spin this on its side a little bit, you can see where this really starts to kick in. These overlapping areas, here we have drama, for example, the dramatic arts, in terms of research, and then representatives in the local neighborhood, and then national and international community. This collection, this overlapping of interests, is known as a pillar of commonality. You can see it with literature, you can see it here in the model for music. Any information or energy that is exerted in terms of research or communication outward from the center into something like music here, it's very easy to consolidate the energy and collect information. And again, anything that is collected is then either reflected or transparent through the center. Looking at it on a larger scale, here you can see our area of Africa, but also we can look at it in context to culture from the Arabic Peninsula or Northern Europe or the Americas. Now what we're going to do is take a look at this on its side. Here you can see a collection of all the different ethnogeographic areas, again based solely on music scale. And here in this collection of these different colors, you can see these pillars of commonality. Here we're looking at music, but not only how music of one culture relates to other cultures within that, but how it starts to talk to other areas. Information that is being shared from one cultural region can quickly be shared with something from the other side of the world. And if the communication structure is right, the center area will again reflect or be transparent to any kind of information that is passed back and forth through any of these outlying satellite areas. Here you can see, for example, maybe comparing the literature of Northern Asia to Indian literature, but how this hopefully will provide access to all these very similar cultural ideas to communicate, but also for some that might not be as obviously common. And again, anything that is communicated is passed back through the center. Now, another way of looking at this model, instead of thinking in terms of the center being a geographic region, think of it in terms of like this as literature, for example, in terms of looking for literature that then relates to Africa or to Northern Asia. So in terms of being able to do research, this model also works for a slightly different approach of thinking in terms of the cultural element being the center, and then the different geographic regions being the satellites and the communication pathways, not only for the local neighborhood, but for the national and international level. Looking at it again on its side, we start to see these pillars of commonality in terms of geographic regions based on a cultural element. And here again, looking at it in terms of the entire world, being broken down into a handful of these cultural elements. Again, if anyone has any other additions, I am all ears. But here you can see a very similar structure and communication flow, just slightly different organizational pathways. And underneath all of this is my own subversive ulterior motive. One of the things I've always believed is that there is a strength in our diversity. Here's a great quote from Michael Novak talking about the unity that is possible in a civilization. One of the things I would like to do with Discover the World is use it as a way of breaking down these cultural barriers, of bringing understanding through the use of culture. And one of the ways to do that is the idea of stealth education. With any piece of research, before any performance or presentation, one of the things that is essential is to give its language, to give its cultural context, to to let the observer or the audience know the story that is being told and the language that is being used to do so. What this will do is allow the observer or the audience to understand this in a much deeper way. Now, Discover the World also has 3 different objectives, along with this collection of research and communication infrastructure. What it represents is a way to deal with research along with performance and presentation within a single culture. Here, for example, could be a web page for Chinese architecture. On the left, you see information about the cultural element, but one of the things that we can also start adding is the human representative. Here you can see it just came up on the right. And in terms of live performances and presentations, the idea of using stealth education as a way of introducing gamelan music or nacha dance. Here's a slide that couldn't go away. But also introducing the language of Indonesian cuisine or South American poetry or these Dogon sculptures, so that the audience, the people that are experiencing this, have a much deeper understanding of not only the element that is being expressed, but the culture it's coming from. The second objective is dealing with cultural hybridity, which means the combination of different cultural elements. Cultural hybridity is a very trendy term right now, and I figured I would use it, but it's how one element combined with another creates something new. In a web page, for example, you could be able to compare different styles of music or visual arts or dance. We can compare different models of cars or different potential mates on a website. Why can't we look at different cultural elements, compare musics from one area to another? And in terms of live performance and presentation, imagine going to see a performance of flamenco dance, traditional African dance, and a classical Indian dance, and then at the end of the evening, we mix it all up. We find what is common to all 3 of them and create our own new style, create our own new performance, a new story, but told with different elements of each one of these, sometimes very disparate cultural elements. Here in terms of just presentation, on the left we have presentation of Indonesian food or sushi. Again, do you guys deliver? And it could also be an evening of South American poetry or a reading of 1001 Arabian Nights, or comparative studies between different cultural, sculptural things around the world. And along with all of this, I really think that internet accessibility is essential. What we used to consider a live performance or event has changed. And live audiences have changed. What I think we could do is for each of these have some kind of internet accessibility through remote, discrete little cameras. You can see different versions. If you have one, you put it over the audience, or different positions to see the performance or presentation, not only from the front, but maybe backstage, and set it up in a way that allows the viewer to select what camera they want to look at and to choose within that what they want to see. This has been used successfully at Fashion Week last year with remote cameras along the runway, very high-class setup. And the third objective is to actually take all this out into the community. With all this collected research and access to different people, we can take this, and what I've done is create a live event model. Here you can see different areas, what I consider performance or presentation areas of, on the left we have English literature and Korean cell phone novels. And as people progress back and forth between these different areas, the one thing that will bring them all together and make for the transitions is food. It is the one thing that I think that people will still come out for, and I think it's where we could have a great time dealing with this cultural hybridity of mixing different kinds of. And here we have it in a larger live event model, again showing progression of people up and down. and alternating performance and presentation areas with food. And what I've done is taken this model and set it up for an example on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia. They have a lot of festivals there, so what I've done is created these rows of different performance and presentation tents, lots of little people. These little black squares you see inside are the cameras. And each one of these tents, these larger ones, could be set up for performances and presentations. The window flaps roll down, providing a greater sense of isolation. Off to the side areas over by the Rodin Museum could be smaller presentation things for literature or visual arts. And here we'll fly through some of the tents, and here we go underneath the parkway, which I've done on more than one occasion after a long Friday night. And this model can be put into place almost anywhere and at almost any different scale. And some of the other ideas to come out of this are on a national and international level. Nationally, one of the things that would be great for every one of these performance/presentation events of working in conjunction with the Stagehands Union, the Carpenters Union, the Electricians Union, being able to provide training and employment for people that are unemployed or homeless. On an international level, one of the things that I've tried to do is to reach out to North Korea and provide opera exchange. If anyone has Kim Jong-un's number, give me a call. Also dealing with the emerging theater art in Egypt. And one of the last things is a global live music performance, all done over the internet, similar to Playing for Change. Thank you for stopping by. Keep your eyes open for more updates.